So we'll move on to national security. Welcome to part two. If you haven't seen part one, go check it out. We're going to continue our discussion of the real political platform for third position party politics in the United States. So, national security, border security. What do we do about the borders? One of the solutions that I thought was pretty good was to not only build a wall, but to put a lot of our military assets, a lot of our soldiers nowadays are just sitting around doing fuck all, sweeping gravel off the pavement. Why not put them into action and actually put them on the wall? I mean, we're paying them anyway. Just put them along the border and actually have border security. What do you think about border security in the United States?
Well, yeah, I agree with just what you said. Yes, the wall is good, and the military is great on the border. Because, like you said, most of them are just sitting around the base, not doing much, anyways, or they're finding things for them to do, which is mainly pencil pushing.
Getting in
So
trouble
yeah,
too.
or that too. Yeah, idle hands.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so yeah, no, we do need a border enforced. We do need a border wall, and we should have military. Why? What country wouldn't have military on their border, right? You're supposed to protect us, so
Yeah, it's
I
like
think that's a great way to protect us.
this whole caravan thing would be over if there was an M1 Abrams on the other side of the wall.
Oh yeah,
It's
and
like,
there was a sternness of willing to use that if you crossed our border. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, that the whole caravan thing is it just shows you how ridiculous things have gotten in this country.
Yeah, it really is. I think there's not a whole lot of disagreement on the whole border thing. Even the center right can agree, and even the center left can agree on border security. So we're good there. I think we'll just reaffirm the America First position on that. Now, police, and this is where things get interesting. I think for me because I have some not necessarily radical solutions, but I think that it would be better if the police returned to a position not of authority but of community well being. The phrase protect and serve is not what the police are doing. The police are tax collectors for the state. They are money grubbing, they steal from people, they put guns in your face, they shoot your dogs, they break down your doors, they terrorize old people and children. And it's like a cult mentality. And also at the same time, police are not being held responsible for their actions because of a lot of the union power behind it. So I think there needs to be a reevaluation of what are the police for? We have a military, we have a national guard, we have SWAT teams. The police are something totally different. And if you look back in the past, a police officer was just what's the guy's name from that old television show with the cops, the Andy Griffith show.
Oh,
The
okay,
cops
yeah,
on
yeah,
there. That's what
yeah.
the cops are, just some local guys with maybe a baton and some handcuffs. They're just there to keep the peace. They don't need to be wearing body armor and have helmets on and like four different kinds of guns on them with 10 different ammunition clips on them. But hold on one
Yeah, no,
sec, you're lagging there. Hold on. Yeah, so really, I mean, the job, if you look at how policing used to be done, it was just kind of keeping the rabble down. I think we should return to that. What do you think?
no, I agree. I mean, it's if I'm driving down the street and I see a police driving next to me, automatically it's I don't want to say fear, but there's tension and stress. I'm thinking, am I in the speed limit? Are my tags right? Is he just going to look at me and I look at him? Then he's going to think I'm staring him down, so he's going to come mess with me. I mean, so all these things run through your mind, and it's you shouldn't feel like that when you see a police officer. Officer, you should have a smile on your face. You should be like, hey, how's it going? And yeah, they've gotten away from the community, and I think this also serves for them to be an apparatus of this state, which doesn't have the people's interest in heart. So they separate them from the community. It makes it easier for them to take harder measures on the citizens, especially now, like we're talking about, if they're feeding and promoting racial divide and inflaming that, they're also doing that with the police and the citizenry as well. So it'll make it easier for them to suppress the citizens when they're called upon to do so, because there's this disconnect between the community and the police now. So yeah, I think they've become a domestic militaristic force, and I think that this isn't a good thing. And most police I know are good people, good natured people, are part of that because they have a sense of ethics, and this is why they become police officers. And I know a lot of them aren't happy about the roles they have to do now, but this is their job. This is what the higher ups tell them, so they follow orders. They'll
Yeah,
do that.
it's good on them for upholding the law, but the laws are bullshit. So,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, one of the things that keeps the community together is local security, and that's what sort of what police were. But it's not like that anymore. They're
Right.
a tax collecting thug force, and I tend to agree with the libertarians. That's exactly what they are. So there needs to
Hmm.
be a cultural change as well as a change in the politics of the police force as a whole. So an interesting thing that we can move to, secret police and information collection agencies like the CIA, like the FBI, Homeland Security, the DEA. What do you think about these organizations? Disband them, reform them, reevaluate?
Reform and reevaluate. I think they're necessary. They're a necessary evil, if that's what we want to call it. You always have to have that, especially in any kind of society. If there's some kind of revolutionary, Marxist organization coming about, it's good to know what's going on with them. It's good to know they're forming. It's good to have agents paying attention to stuff like that. But they should definitely be reformed. Once again, what benefit are they doing really for the Americans right now? We don't know. They seem more oppressive now. We know everywhere we're recorded. I put this phone anywhere next to me. I'm recording myself for God knows who. So it's that is the reality of the situation. I think it is a necessary apparatus. It's just the people at the head of it right now, and a lot of the people entrenched in that system as well, are not the best of characters, and unfortunately, they have so much power uh, over us that that's something we have to contend with. But yeah, I'm not against the idea per se. I'm against the application of it and the people doing it.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree with that as well. I think that sort of the JFK scatter them to the wind is a good suggestion, reforming them, and also much like the police, holding them accountable for their actions. Stop covering up for legitimate crimes because that's not justice. If they fall out of line, they need to be held accountable for it. And that's one thing that gives them so much power is that they're untouchable. It's an untouchable class of law enforcement. It's like that's not how the law should function. So I definitely agree with that. I think it's necessary. Personally, I think I would perhaps maybe combine the FBI and the CIA into some central authority, like some espionage agency that does both foreign and domestic. And we have to make sure that when they're on domestic soil, that they're not overreaching, and that we have good diplomatic ties to other nations, of course. But sending agents overseas is a good way to collect intelligence, which is very necessary in today's world. So something that we're going to have to think about. So I think we're cool on that. But reform, reevaluate should be our stance on that.
Yeah.
Same thing. What about foreign espionage on our soils? How do we deal with that? Should we deal with that? Is it a good thing, bad thing? It's like foreign
From
spies,
foreign countries,
right?
yeah, execute them. I mean, that's how I deal with them.
Yeah, so, simple
You know what
answer.
I mean? That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. Uh,
I mean, I guess you can bargain with the country if they got your spy. They have your. I mean, I guess there's always that, but outside of that, I mean, if there's no bargaining, if there's nothing to be gained from it, yeah, execute them. So to deter anyone else from trying to do that
if we're
stuff.
not working with them, essentially. Now, I wouldn't want
Yeah.
spies on our soil, but maybe there's something they could teach us. I don't know. So long as if we don't know that they're there and we find out, they're going to be put in chains essentially, and we may tell you they're there, we may not. They may just disappear one day, and we need to instill that fear in our diplomatic relations that we're not afraid to take care of these people if you step out of line. If you're
Hmm.
not in line with our values, or if you're intruding on our land and soil, we're not going to stand for that. So I think that's something to think about. This sort of espionage. How familiar are you with sort of internet espionage, sort of external influence like these hacker groups and sort of these attacks on American networking infrastructure? Are you familiar with any of that, or any comments
Hmm.
you want to make about that?
Hmm. Well, same thing with them as well. I mean, if you catch them, they should be dealt with, especially if they're attacking something that's vital to your country or your security or anything like that. They should be treated the same way. I don't give a fuck if they're a 16-year-old teenager playing around or a grown adult trying to subvert and attack a country or ruin our power grid or whatever it is they're hacking or trying to do. It should be taken very seriously, especially in this age we live in. So yeah, I think it's I think they're the same thing. They're spies on foreign soil, essentially, even if they are American, and that's how they're acting doing that. So
Well,
yeah, I have a real hard line with that. I think if you're subverting the nation, and especially if everything's working good and it's a very positive thing we've built, and we've reestablished this concept of brotherhood amongst us, and we have these Faustian drives in us now that we're obtaining and accomplishing, and then you're going to subvert and attack that. I have very little empathy for people like that. So
so my primary thing with bringing this up is, what do you do with people who are overseas who may be attacking the security of the nation over the internet or something? Do you convene with the other nations? How serious do we take this? Essentially, it's a diplomatic relationship, do you think?
yeah, yeah, it is. We would have to convene with the nation and let them know how serious we are about it. And if they're not a part of it, they should be gladly willing to give up the person, just like we would for them. But if they're protecting the person, then you can see maybe there's ulterior motives with that country as well. So I think they'll show their hand essentially with how they deal with that situation.
Right. And as someone who works in networking, I would say that we need to reevaluate how much money we're spending on network defense, because it's not adequate. We're still getting attacked every single second of every single day by foreign actors, and sometimes they do penetrate the networks. So we need to reevaluate, like, how much money are we spending on domestic defense? Way too fucking much, and we're getting essentially nothing out of it. So along the same lines
Yeah.
I said about the military in the other video, we need to reevaluate and put this money essentially where it needs to be. I mean, we're buying it, we should get it. So,
Yep. Yep.
and last thing in national security, what do you think about domestic spying on citizenry? Things like the NSA or phone tapping, wiretapping. Is it in the interest of the nation to collect everyone's data or tap people's phone lines without warrant? Where do you stand on that?
That's another one of these gray areas here.
This is why
Yeah.
I'm talking about it, because you got to think
Yeah.
about it, because it's like
Hmm.
there's a lot of anti-NSA sentiments in the country, and
I know.
if you can stealthily slip in, your position in there, say, hey, maybe we'll dismantle all of this,
Hmm.
it's something to consider.
That's true. You could say you dismantle it, but then imagine yourself in power, and you're like, well, this would be a good thing to have, so I know, what's going on if someone's planning to subvert an attack or to do anything. So I think when you come down to the average citizen, no, but when it comes down to groups and organizations that could possibly be troublesome, that they should be looked into and it should be evaluated. Should we continue to keep the magnifying glass on them, see what they're doing, or are they just blowing hot air, essentially, just youthful angst and rebellion,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
that's it. So I think some sort of function should still exist. I don't like the idea, even though we're in the age, like I said, we tell on ourselves. We got these smartphones here that record that anytime they want to tap into it, then people have like Alexas and all this, and we're going more and more into AI. So like we're like essentially telling on ourselves for the most part, but two private corporations. They're
Honestly, I
small.
mean, I would love to see a society in which every home could have some kind of Alexa that wasn't tapped in directly to the NSA or a private corporation. That'd be great. The technology is wonderful. The problem
Yeah.
is that it's used for nefarious purposes. And one of the things is, and this is an idea I have to think a lot more about, but one of the issues with bureaucracy is that we try and do preventative law, preventative statutes. Like, say, it's like, okay, you're not allowed to sleep with a chicken on a Tuesday after midnight, or you're not allowed to drive a car left-handed down the shoulder of this road, every blue moon or whatever. It's like you get this massive list of the legal system. It's like no one can interpret that. So I think rather than doing that preventative justice or preventative legal system, just give the power to the state to take a reactionary approach, use reason and evidence to go in and investigate. For example, rather than having the NSA collecting everybody's information, have actual intelligence gathering, put the FBI or whatever it is to actual use in sort of the domestic spying. Like, keep tabs on people who you think need to be kept tabs on, and then once you find out that you have some kind of probable cause or whatever it is, then the state should have the power to step in and surveil them. That this is one of the huge issues. I don't know if you know how much infrastructure goes into the NSA, but it's so massive I can't even begin to describe it.
Well, look how massive that is. Then look at this kid that shot up the school in
Yeah, I was
Florida.
gonna bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah, and all the warnings with this kid, and it's like you let him slip through, but you're sitting there spying on every Joe Schmo and all this throughout the
Mm-hmm.
country. Yeah, like you said, funds misspent. Typically, what goes on in this society are funds misspent.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, more of that going on here.
All right, let's transition to a wonderful topic, and that is healthcare. So I'll run through it. Public or private healthcare, or some sort of mixed system. What do you think?
Public. I'm full nationalist on healthcare. I think once again, like we're talking about with the legal system, that you need a cultural change as much as you need a legal overhaul. Same with healthcare. We need a cultural change. We're as fat as we've ever been. We're as sick as we've ever been, and our life expectancy is going to start declining. So even with all the medications, everything else, and then people even living older are in miserable states as well. So we need, once you change that, the health and the dynamics of the people, I think you help your healthcare a lot. And I think a lot of people, my wife works in healthcare, so I have a little anecdotal experiences with this, and just seeing how many people come in there because of how bad they have treated their body, how
Right.
bad they have treated themselves. And I think once you get away from this mentality of shoving burgers and sodas and pizzas in everyone's face 24/7 on every commercial and billboard
Yep.
and all of this, that will take care of a lot of it. But I'm a firm believer in nationalized healthcare. Like, as a fascist, I believe we're part of a team in this nation. We have to have that concept. We're part of this team. And if you really care about your fellow citizen, if you really do have this concept of brotherhood, because we are citizens, then you shouldn't want anyone to be in debt just to make themselves better if a disease comes about or anything else. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in nationalized healthcare. Once again, remove the parasitic elements, kind of have a better cultural change and shift in society, and I think it won't be so hard to maintain that nationalized healthcare.
Sure. And would you be in favor of uh, banning privately owned healthcare facilities, whether it's something as small as, okay, here's Doctor whatever, and he removes splinters from people's feet, and that's all he does, but it's a private institution. Would you be okay with smaller institutions like that forming, or like specialized care facilities for certain
I,
people?
on the surface value, no, I wouldn't. But I guess what would come from that? I guess I don't know. I guess that's something that you'd have to see how that plays out.
Right.
But on its face value, no, I wouldn't be against something like that. If it's something that's, if people can get splinters removed from a nationalized hospital, but some reason the quality's better at this private place and they want to go there and they're willing to pay what the doctor's asking, then I wouldn't see a problem with it on the surface value. Could it manifest into a problem? Possibly. I don't know. So, but on the surface value, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay. Yeah, because again, I'd like to see a nationalized healthcare uh, treatment option for people. And some of the ideas I had were that you can have this system and it's going to function better once there's no parasitical classes. We obviously don't want something like the NHS or the Canadian healthcare system because it's just dog shit. But ours is too expensive and we have too many issues with corporate interests interfering with our medical lives. And obviously, we want to take care of the health of the nation. But what I propose, and you can tell me if this is shit or not, if you pay into the system, you should get access to it. But there's going to be strict requirements for certain individuals. If you have a preventable disease or ailment, you should not be allowed access to it. For example, if you spent 40 years as a smoker and you're dying of lung cancer, that is a preventable disease that you're just draining funds away from the healthcare that should be, sort of the nationalized system. There's no reason why you should gain access and use an immense amount of resources to take care of a disease that you shouldn't have because you should be responsible. The same thing goes for morbidly obese people to a certain extent. It's like, stop stuffing cheeseburgers in your goddamn face and you'll get access to this wonderful healthcare system.
Maybe that's why you have these little private companies existing. Then, if people like that,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So on the surface value, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I would just say you would need to be really, really clear about it, because what if someone, eats pizza and cheeseburgers every now and then, but they got cancer? You're like, well, no, you ate way too much of this processed meat.
We're,
So
we're
it's
talking
like,
about like actual, like known, scientifically observable, beyond a reasonable doubt ailments that are caused by your
right.
shitty behavior.
If we have a fine line there, yeah, I don't see a problem with that. And like you brought up with the small medical private industry, they could exist for that. Hey, I can't get treated for my lung cancer because I smoked my whole life. I did it to myself knowingly. But if I have enough money, I'll go to this private person and they'll treat me. So
Right.
yeah, there's the option, and that could open up that small private market as well. So
Sure, and
yeah,
but the thing is, I think this would incentivize people to live healthier lives. It's a reaction to what I see with the NHS, where you have someone who's just eaten nothing but garbage their whole lives, and now they have heart problems, and it takes 10 people to lift them out of bed. It's like this could have been prevented. It's like the parents who give their children sweets and they have to get their teeth pulled. I just watched the most horrific
mm-hmm.
documentary about the NHS, where you have these children who come in with preventable diseases like, you got a fat kid, okay, stop feeding him shit. But if you do that, not only are you irresponsible, and I'm looking at punitive justice for parents who mistreat their children, but you're taking money away from people with legitimate illnesses. You're
Yeah.
it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's stealing from people. And of course we should educate people better on these things, and culture will redirect some of this, but I think there needs to be stricter requirements. Like, we shouldn't be giving out, sexual reassignment surgery or hormone treatments or any of this other nonsense. Like, the same thing goes for abortion. Even I have a secular reason to not be in favor of abortion, and state funded as well.
Well,
In some scenarios, there's
it
caveats to
well,
that.
there's caveats for sure, but like in modern day context, I am a huge fan of abortion. In in a
Can I tell a
good
joke?
fascistic, huh?
Can I tell a joke real quick?
Yeah.
So, what was it? Broke free access to healthcare, or free access to abortion, woke protesting abortion, and bespoke asking what color the baby is. Yeah, but yeah, there are certain caveats to
Yeah.
the whole abortion thing. Obviously, I think it's
Yeah.
morally it's reprehensible, but there are instances where we have to use reason and evidence to say, okay, that this is perfectly fine that you end that life. And I think culture again will shift this
Yeah.
attitude greatly.
Yeah.
So
Because it used to not be there. The child, it used to be how many children you had, you'd lose a couple, a couple hundred years ago.
right,
And it'd be it's so precious to have a child. Now, yeah, to see the mentality, I can say callously, like I support abortion today because I do, because the demographics and everything, it like game
yeah,
over already if we didn't have abortion. So for that reason, but I hate the mentality of people like, oh, I got pregnant, let me go kill this baby. It's like, what the fuck kind of sick mentality is that? I don't get it. I
yeah.
mean,
The
I don't
people
get
who
it.
say I'm glad I killed my children, it's like, what the fuck?
Oh,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
horrible.
yeah. It is. But like I said, there's always caveats. I do think. I don't know. What do you think about this? I do think if you're going to see your child's retarded, you should be able to abort it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
As far
Okay.
as like birth defects and shit, pure eugenics.
Yeah.
Like, let's take the
Okay. Okay.
Icelandic approach. Like, if you like, I would encourage prenatal screening to be one of our highest priorities to get rid
Yeah.
of these illnesses, because I think it's morally reprehensible to be so egotistical as to bring a child into this world that will never be a functioning member of society, will never lead a normal life, and you're enslaving yourself to this child because of your own hubris. And it's like,
Mhm.
I'm perfectly fine with, in cases like this where the pregnancy is terminated, because not only does that improve the conditions of the individual, and we can create more kids, obviously, but it improves the conditions of society because you no longer have a permanent underclass that's taking resources away from everybody else. There's no
Yeah.
reason,
Exactly.
and no, I'm not in favor of, retard death squads or anything like that, but we cannot allow uh, this to be. We can't put these people on a pedestal, because what are they providing? Nothing. They suck up resources essentially, and the only reason they exist is because of the parental bond. That's it. If people applied reason and evidence, which I know is hard, they would not have carried these pregnancies to term. So, especially in cases like that, cases like where the mother's life may be threatened, obviously, I'd rather have the mother alive than the unborn child for the
And
most
rape,
part.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you bring a child into this world who is the result of rape, there's going to be mother child resentment. There's going to be it's 99% of the time it's going to be a single parent household, which causes criminality, things like that. Yeah, these are cases where we have to apply reason to our judgments. So this the thing I disagree with the Christian moralists. Like, yeah, we agree on some basic principles, but you have to apply just a little bit of critical thinking to it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the fast food problem, as we've kind of touched on a little bit, and this really revolves a lot around there is a problem that occurred in the early 20th century. And I don't know if you're aware of how important iodine is to our diets. Are you familiar with that?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
basically, our source of iodine used to be flour because it was the main source of people's food, bread, wheats, grains, things like that. And so people would iodize flour so that we could get our intake of iodine, which is very important for the function of the thyroid. So what we switched to is we started iodinizing salt instead. You know, when you go get table salt, it says iodized on it, right? And so your body is craving salty food because it's an essential part of your diet to receive this iodine. One of the issues with salty, fatty foods that people like cheeseburgers, is extremely full of sodium, is that our bodies have switched into a mode where we crave those things because it's a source of an important ingredient in our physical well-being. So one of the things that I would propose is to reevaluate this decision to uniodize flour or something similar to that, and obviously processed sugars, stop all the subsidies, perhaps even outright ban the production of certain sugary things, heavily tax sodas, and it's basically just carbonated poison, you know, things
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
Those are things we can agree on. What do you think?
Yeah, no, completely, completely, and that's one thing. I forget who was it. New York, the mayor, Jewish mayor too, billionaire guy. I forget his name, but
De Blasio, is that his name?
not Blasio. Before
Um,
him, he was talking about running for president too at one
oh,
time.
Giuliani.
Not Giuliani, Jewish guy.
I'm afraid I don't know much about New York City. It's
Yeah,
not
well,
my area.
he had passed something where he put taxes on sodas, and the right wing threw a fit. They're like, oh, there. I was like, well, this is actually a good thing. It's about time someone started doing this.
Yeah.
And same with like cigarettes and things like that. Yeah, they should be. I don't think, like I said, we can't be the purist and oh, you can't do this, you can't do this. There's all because a black market would be formed anyways. But
Oh yeah.
there's there's always like there's you want to make it to where the most, like, let's say it's 80% education, 20% entertainment. It's like that's essentially what you kind of want that makeup, instead of now it's 80% entertainment, 20% education with most people. That and if you get in conversations with just regular people, it's like so empty. It's about sports, it's about weather, it's about like there's nothing deeper people kind of go
Yeah.
into on.
Marvel, DC, Rick and Morty, all this pop culture garbage. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So this is usually what it comes down to. So if you can do that, if you can create it to where there's not an abundance of fast food around you anymore that's giving you these processed meats, which science has shown us is not good for us. Like I said, heavily salted, so much sodium, blood pressure. They call it the silent killer. So many people die from it.
Yep. Preventable
I
disease.
had preventable disease, and I had issues with that too because that was one of my Achilles heels. One of the dragons that I still fight with was I've gone from fat to fit, fat to fit, fat to fit numerous times in my life because food was always a punishment and a comfort for me, right? I punished myself through food and I comforted myself through food. And like that, more than cigarettes, more than anything else, was like one of my main dragons. And it comes, and because of that, I ended up having high blood pressure issues
Yep.
because of a lot of self-inflicted wounds from my habits of spiking up and down through weight and health.
Yep.
So it is something, and it's not to put the blame on the people putting it out there, but when you've grown up in an environment, and same with your parents too, that most parents aren't thinking about, oh my God, they just want to make the kids happy. So the kids want ice cream, get them ice cream all the time. The kids want this, or it's easier just to throw this in the microwave than to cook and prepare a
Right.
meal.
And yeah, a lot of that has to do with the culture of the gender dynamic where women aren't, they're not providing for the household. They're out in the workplace. And
Yes.
I can't say I blame them for not having time to cook, but yeah, that's one of
Yeah.
the reasons. There's no education on health and things like that. So there needs to be a reawakening of health consciousness in society.
And not make the bad food so abundant. Like, okay, they're still going to be there. We're not going to tell you, oh, you can't have a candy bar, you can't drink a soda here, but you're going to do a lot less of it because it's going to cost a lot more, and you're not going to find it everywhere. You're not going to have commercials in your face daily. Like you have commercials in your face with spinach, broccoli, and lean chicken breast, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're going to be.
They're going to be state-run ads where
Yeah,
it's just a picture of like a piece of broccoli and behind it's going to be one of those spirographs or whatever.
yeah. And
Eat
we're going to fat
broccoli.
shame people. Damn it,
Oh,
we're going to fat
absolutely.
shame them and everything else. You're going to be ashamed to be
You
fat,
know,
and that's
in fact, I would almost be in favor of putting a law in place that says if you reach 400 pounds, we're gonna come and pick you up and put you in state mandated fat camp, until you lose the weight, because that's like the only way that these people can do it nowadays.
The Chinese did that with internet addicts. They would take internet addicts to this boot camp and force them in there. So yeah, there's a lot we can learn from
And
them.
it's not like it's hard to spot fat people. It's like, hey, that guy's fucking, he can't fit through the door. Might want to send him to fat camp.
Yeah, it takes 2 chairs to get on a plane. Yeah, we got to do something here. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's all preventable, I believe, and it's just minimalizing the negativity, because right now in this capitalist society, it's soulless. Give a shit. They don't give a shit if you clog your arteries and die at 40,
Yeah,
50,
yeah,
60.
they don't care if they're targeting
care.
children for these ad campaigns. It's like,
Yeah.
and it not only does it destroy the local beauty of the cities, but it infects your mind. It's
Yeah.
ruined media. It's like you can't go to the movies, and see a decent film without it just being pure corporate propaganda. Like one of the worst examples. Did you see the reboot of Jurassic Park
No.
with Chris Pratt or whatever?
No.
It was an hour and a half of just ads. Like the
Oh,
way
really?
that they positioned the Mercedes in the shot every time, the way that they had the perfectly placed
Holding the soda
Coca-Cola.
can as he drinks it, and hey, yeah.
Exactly. It's like, God, I get so fucking angry at that shit. It's like, what happened to film? What happened to pop
Yeah.
culture? Pop culture used to be at least slightly entertaining. It wasn't so degenerate, you know?
I guess that's what's good about like the shows like Game of Thrones and Tudors and Rome that go back in time. It's hard to have advertisements placed in there.
Oh yeah, it's perfect. And the other thing is like, the whole reliance on ad culture is pretty toxic for the most part, because it's like what are you really producing? Not a whole lot.
Yeah.
They got some problems with it. But anyway, so any other thoughts about healthcare that you want to throw in while we're still on it?
No, I think we hit it. The culture needs a lot of working on. And I think a lot of it take cares of itself once we get rid of this capitalist mentality. Once we get rid of just I'm out for myself, dog eat dog, don't care about my fellow citizen. And I liked your idea about if someone has done it to himself, and it's overwhelmingly obviously he did it to himself, that his only option may be this private entity. And I like that. I didn't think about that before, but I think that's a nice thing you added on there. I would agree with that too.
It'll be something to look at with the medical professionals, and we'll enumerate all that. But let's move on to
Mm-hmm.
education. So similar with healthcare, public, private, or mix.
Uh, well, I public for sure. I nationalized education, but I guess I don't even want to create a private in this instance, because with your elite schools, I want people through merit to get there. And then if you have private schools that are elite, you're not going to get people through merit. You're going to get people through money that get there.
Right.
So I think meritocracy should decide where a person. I don't think everyone needs to go to college. Right now, college is a business. They want everyone to go there, take a student loan, pay money, get a useless degree.
Yeah.
A lot of them are kind of dumbed down and easier, especially the community colleges.
Yeah, and it hurts the people overall.
And it hurts the people. Yeah.
It's a sort of capitalist business structure that's in line with the banks who make tons of money off of this loan repayment debt. So it's a huge issue.
Yeah.
And but my main thing was like, what do you think about homeschooling and communal schooling, the way that things used to be? You think it should be outright banned, or?
No, well, see, if you like you're talking about earlier, like if you have certain literature that you need the society to read so they understand what the system they're living under is and what the direction of the society is. I don't think you can go on and homeschool your kids, but they have to go through K through 12 through the national schools for sure, because they need to be a part of that community. What homeschooling does, even today, is every homeschooling, not every, I won't be so absolutist, but a lot of them are very socially awkward. Even if they're intelligent, more intelligent than your public school, they can't adapt to society well. And most of what society, how you gain in this society, is through social interaction.
Yep.
And when you're missing that foundation, and I've seen it numerous times in the workplace where someone is good at their job, but they're socially awkward, and they kind of get pushed out of it for the person that might not be as good, but socially interactive with people. So I think if you're having a society as we're envisioning, you're not going to have necessary need to keep them away from the public school and to keep them in homeschool. But if you want to give them extra education, if you want to teach them your religion, if or anything like that, or your ethics or anything else, then of course you always have the opportunity to do that. but you should at least go through the public schools to get the fundamental knowledge that is presented forth, and at least an understanding of society and building that community. Because once again, if you're having these schools and you're having look at the youth programs of Italy and Germany, and you're having things like this going on, but you're having this group of children that are outside of that, then they're not going to be a part of that community as that community grows up and they have this shared experience. That's how brotherhood's created, is through shared experiences,
Right, through
shared
shared.
struggle.
Yeah, I was just about you took the words out of my mouth. Yeah, yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think we're going to come into a lot of conflict with the religious parents who want to teach their things. But one of the big questions is, what do we do about states' rights in this instance? Would you have a, not necessarily a national curriculum, but a bare minimum that each state needs to apply and then they can build off of that? Or would you be in favor of just let the states take care of it? Because many conservatives are on the path of federal government has no input whatsoever on the state's education system.
Yeah, well, no, and when we're talking about third position society, no, federal input for sure.
Yep.
You need to nationalize input. But I agree with states' rights as well. Culturally, certain states might express a certain kind of culture and more people can move to that state. So like I appreciate that, but there needs to be a common learning, a common theme, so we have this unity. Once we start, if we allow the education to be separate in each state, we're going to build division. We're going to have teachers coming in there saying, well, actually, this fascism isn't so great. There was this thing called democracy and everyone loved it and they took it away from
Right.
us. So you start doing that. But I think as far as state rights go, as far as cultural expression and things like that, I do think you should have that as well. Because I think that people, when we talk about self-segregation, I think this is another way to self-segregate, is when you have maybe Iowa is more in tune with who you are culturally, maybe demographically they are as well. And you're like, oh,
Right.
let me go to Iowa and out of here. So I think you should have as much as that. But education should definitely, we should all be on the same team as that. And we ideally have a society and system we trust at that time.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't see anything too oppressive
Not
about that.
not a day one change or anything, but a slowly, like
No,
we
yeah.
introduce the philosophy and say, hey, here's why we need to do this, and so on and so forth. But what was I going to say? Certain programs that we should encourage or put through with this national curriculum. One of them is actual practical knowledge. And some people think that, when you say nationalized education, they think Soviet Union style cult of personality. They think Common Core neoliberalism, corporatist garbage, the Monopoly by McGraw Hill and McLaughlin and all of that garbage. We need to really make sure that this is not the impression that we give off when we say nationalize education. One of the
Mhm.
things is practical skills, learning about the history of the nation and the history of the people, which is why, sort of on the state level, I would say this would be something that they come up with. It's like, if you want to learn that, because I learned the history of Texas where I lived, and it was pretty important to understanding the struggle of the state of Texas, I think, which is very important when it comes to local unity in the community. It's like, we take a trip to the Alamo and learn about the Alamo and the sort of the history of the state and Sam Houston and all those things. But at the same time, there needs to be a heavy focus on physical education because kids are staying in way too much. I would almost be in favor of having not gender segregation in the way that you think of it, where each school is like boys only or girls only, but in the classroom setting, I think that little boys and little girls are taught in different ways. They learn in different ways. Boys are very active. It's perfectly natural. And what we're seeing a lot today is the suppression of the natural attitudes of men and women. Everything's trying to be feminized. Boys just can't learn anymore. They have to be pumped up with drugs and taught a specific way and ostracized from the class for acting like young boys, which is just killing masculinity. So I think that young boys should be taught by responsible male teachers in a more male oriented environment. I think they should share a school with women because socialization is very, very important. What do you think about this just gender dynamic?
Well, I agree with you. I wonder if that's not another Pandora's box issue where people would freak out over that. But no, I agree with you. I think there's a different dialectic amongst men and women, girls and boys, and when you mix it all together, like you said, not only do you feminize them, but you take away the femininity from the women as well. So
Yeah, it's
It's
like they're gonna have to learn certain things about motherhood and how to, you know, how to vacuum and do the dishes. No, I'm just kidding. But there's certain things that they're gonna have to learn that's not applicable to men. You know, how to take care. Like from a very early age, I want it instilled in young girls what it is like to be a mother, how to take care of a child. This should be natural instinct. We should build off of that natural instinct. You know, how to be a caretaker, how to foster a good community, how to choose the right man to mate with, those kind of things. And when it comes to young boys, this is something I'm very protective about because I didn't have a good experience necessarily growing up. It was very feminized. Luckily, we still had physical education quite frequently, but when I talked to my great grandparents and my grandparents about how they went to school, you know, they would have a rifle shooting club and they would learn about military history, and it was very masculine. You know, they had a lot of male teachers who could really show you how men think and how to socialize with other men, which I think is very important. And we've really lost that. That
Mhm.
sensibility has been lost quite frequently. So I think having
Well, we
uh,
got the Boy Scouts, don't we?
no, not anymore. Not anymore.
Exactly,
We'll
exactly.
get to Boy Scouts here in just a sec, but I think that more physical education, more
Oh, martial arts as well. I think
oh yeah,
in K-12 they should be learning forms of martial arts. Yeah.
we should be creating like little super soldiers in school.
Oh
You
yeah.
know,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Every kid should know how to fight. There'll be a lot less fights too. So
yeah, yeah. If you're, you know, if every person you try and bully, you're afraid that they're going to kick your teeth in, you're not going to bully
yeah,
them, you know?
exactly,
And I
exactly.
think that at certain points, like maybe 9, 10 years old, you supervise them, give them a, you know, a 22 caliber rifle and teach them how to shoot, teach them how to
Hmm.
survive on their own. In school, actually, not an extracurricular thing, but this is something that every single young man needs to know how to defend themselves, defend their property, and defend their family. That's something that isn't taught. And so going back to the simplicity and governance thing, teaching kids exactly how the legal system works, what the laws are, how the government is structured, the philosophy behind it, not just, oh, here's democracy, here's a picture of George Washington, here's, you know, World War II, you know, you spend a month on the Holocaust or whatever, you know, practical knowledge that can be applied to people, teach them critical thinking rather than this
Hmm.
knowledge retention crap that I had to go through with all
Hmm.
the standardized testing. In fact, if we had a nationalized education system, I would be against standardized testing. I would almost leave that up to the states because of demographics. You know,
Hmm.
I don't know what you think about standard. If you ever had to go through standardized testing when you were younger,
I think you can have both. I think you can have both. You can have a standardized test, and you can have tests more specific, like you said, to the area, the people, and to the field. So yeah, I think there's room for both.
I think maybe you
I
could have like a certain age range where it's like when you turn 5 years old, you get the 5 year old standardized test. When you hit 10 years old, you get the 10 year old standardized test, or grades. You know, when you hit when you go into middle school, you get the middle school standardized test to place you somewhere in the hierarchy, and then when you get to 18 years old and you're ending your uh, the initial stages of your education, you take a specialized test in some field that you've been studying in for a few years in high school or something like that to sort of give you an idea of how much you've learned and if you should go to college or something like that.
and on top of that, I think what you touched on, the most important is critical thinking, because that is not even in the universities are you having much critical thinking going on, and that's been the biggest crime. And I think one of the benefits, like I've never been to a high school, like I never went to high school. I only did like a year in middle school, and that was it. That was the extent of my K through 12 education. And that, while like it affected some basics in my grammar and things like that, I'm rough around the edges in grammar and pronunciations, things like that, that I could have had basic building blocks learned from that in elementary or middle school and high school. But hurt me there. But where it really helped me was I was able to critically think. I was able to be someone who thought outside the box because I was mainly self-educated. I mainly had to
Right.
get educated through what I was looking into, what I was asking questions about myself from and digging into it, and not just having these teachers read off, you know, oh, so and so on this date, so and so on this date, so and so on this date, and the same repetitive thing. So, and I noticed that when because I took GED and it was a piece of cake. And then I got going to the university, and I just realized like like how many dumb, intelligent people like were in the college that everyone thought they were so educated, but they were just so stupid, and they didn't realize like how trained they really were. Like none of them were thinking outside of the box. They all fit in either the right or left, right? And they fit in that little square created for them, and they all thought they knew everything. And I was like, wow, these people are very ignorant to a lot of things in life, a lot of things to do with common sense that I think it benefited me not going through being drilled into my brain these structures and these functions, and instead being able to question myself and look outside into myself, into the things that I wondered about. Why did this happen? Who was this? And when you dig into it yourself, you get more of a critical thinking approach, and you get a deeper understanding of things. So I think, oddly enough, that lack of public education really helped me out in the end, because I don't think I would have ended up where I was if I didn't go down the path I did. I think I'd, just have a regular job, be a normie essentially, and just going about my way right now, watching the sports team. So,
Right, exactly. So yeah, it's all good points. Nationalized education, I think we can all get behind that. That's pretty much the message, that we would put out there. And of course, we talked a little bit about college, reevaluating college. I think there should be a national standard for cognitive function. When someone applies to college, we need to either develop or co opt a cognitive test that can show exactly how far along they are. And if they reach a certain level, then they should be allowed to attend college. And obviously, we
or
know.
or if they're going into a specific field, a test on that field, like their aptitude at that.
Right, have
So,
bring specialists together in the state and say, "Hey, how do you test for your field of work?" And they put a test together, we finalize it, and we give it to the people. But
mhm.
the other big issue with college is, of course, the financial system behind it. But that will get solved once we solve the financial crisis that is underlying it, and stop treating it as such a commodity, and really revalue these college educations, and put people in trades and give them practical jobs. Essentially,
Mhm.
community college is another good thing that we could consider. That having people get an associate's degree is not so bad for the most part. I'd rather be in a trade personally, but it's something to consider. Teaching people,
Mhm.
hey, you got to have the self introspection to realize that you're not cut out for college. That's
Mhm.
basically all it is. That comes from culture. So I think we're all good on there. And so let's move on to the environment and the environment protection policies. Obviously, very strong on environmental protection policies. You have some thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I mean, it's not my wheelhouse. I wouldn't know what laws and how much carbon this and that. Like, it's not anything I'm educated on. But yeah, on the surface value, of course, it's we don't want to destroy this planet. We don't want to destroy our home, right? And we're all birthed from it anyway. So it is, we are connected to it, whether we acknowledge that or not. So yeah, I think it shows on us if we misuse this place, what kind of species we are. And so, yeah, I think we should protect it. I think there's a fine line. We do live in modernity. We are humans. We are eventually going to evolve past nature in this planet, I believe. So that is reality. But at the same time, we should not destroy this place as we do it. But what specific laws and how do we implement that? I wouldn't know how to address that accurately.
Basically, I think this is the one of the best, along with universalized healthcare. This is another in to the more leftist crowd, so to speak. The Democrat Party's like, hey, we're eco freaks, we're eco fascists. We want to protect the environment more than you do. And I think one of the primary concerns, we don't even have to get into specific laws. Just say that, hey, if you knowingly ruin the environment, you're going to get the maximum sentence, because that's justice. You have essentially imposed violence on people by ruining their ability to live. Essentially, if you do something like Flint, if you knowingly put lead into the water table, how many people have you killed? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's it's incountable, really. And so you need the maximum sentence, which I think if we start taking these industrial heads of the companies and put them on the chopping block, people are gonna wake up real fast and say, "Hey, I'm not gonna fuck with the environment." And we can there is reason, and because I'm familiar with this in my work, there is a case to be made to reduce the current environmental regulations to an extent and just make them simpler and just say, "Hey, don't do X, Y, and Z." We don't even have to get into specific percents. We know what happens when you put mercury and lead in the water supply. We know what happens when you use the what's it called? Oh God, I'm drawing a blank here. The anti what's it called? The The stuff that was in the twin towers that kept it from catching on fire, the anti-inflammatory material.
Mm.
Asbestos. Jesus
Yes,
Christ.
yeah, okay,
Asbestos.
yeah.
Yeah, we all know what the effects of that are. Cancers and things like that.
Hmm.
Mesothelioma, obviously. So it's very simple environmental protections, but it's at the foremost of our thought is protecting the environment which we live in. So I think there's really no disputing there, but it is important to keep in mind this is where we draw in the leftist crowd here.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on renewable versus non-renewable energy?
Once again, it's not a field I'm renewable obviously sounds better, right? It's more eco-friendly, as we're told. So I would um I would definitely opt for that, right? If possible, if maintainable. But yeah, outside of that, I would let the people that actually knew it and had the right intentions debate on that and figure out, what's what as far as that
Right.
goes.
The same thing. We need to reevaluate, what companies were propping up. Obviously, Obama's failed solar was the solar research company that he gave, $350 million to or whatever, and it ended up
Oh
failing.
goodness.
Yeah. So things like that, we need to reevaluate and actually put some merit to these contracts for renewable energy. And obviously, we take the Trump approach, which is to say that right now we cannot produce adequate energy on renewables alone. We need to investigate alternative, potentially free energy sources, essentially. And the problem that's keeping us from this is lobbying from oil companies and the sort of capitalist mindset that energy is a commodity that should be bought and sold. But it's the thing that fuels everybody's lives, especially if you like technology. It's like we should work towards a 100% sustainable way. But I don't think we should break our economy by, banning coal and banning oil usage and banning natural
Right.
gas. It's like there's going to be a point where we replace it, but the time isn't now. So I think that's the stand we would take on that. Let's see. And obviously, government controlled utilities like electricity and water and all the basic necessities controlled by the
Hmm.
state. But like we've been saying, reevaluate, redeploy our assets in an effective manner. Stop spending so much money on garbage. Sort of get the best people in there, not Joe Blow's cousin. From nepotism, you get actual engineers and things like that in there, and fix some of these issues with utilities.
Very technocratic. Fascism, third position, is very technocratic in essence. It's you want the best people, most qualified people with the right intentions, being there, being able to voice their opinion and push forth laws to go through. So yeah, it's you always want the most qualified people with the right intentions.
I always say that if you're in favor of the justice system, well, how much more just can you get by putting the appropriate person, the most well qualified person in that position? That's really applying justice. So you got the best
Mm-hmm.
person for the job with the best intentions, rather than something like Venezuela, where yeah, they nationalize the oil industry, but then Maduro puts in all his cousins at the head of state of the oil industry. It's like no wonder it failed because they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah.
That's the biggest difference between
Yeah.
the third position and communism and neoliberalism. It's like there shouldn't be any room for nepotism, essentially.
Yeah. Intentions. That's why I say with the right intentions in these people. If they have that's all we need.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll move to social policies, and this is a bit of a long one, but certain, of course, people are afraid that, like we talked about, homo death squads and all that stuff, but that's not what we're worried about. We need to make very clear that that's not what we're here to do. Um, Marriage and child incentives, like the Third Reich's loan policy with families who bear children. Obviously, you get a loan of a certain amount that's supposed to help with raising a family, and every child you pop out takes off a part of the loan. That's a very good policy. It's one of my favorites that they introduced, obviously, because it's you want to bump up those demographics, start giving people money to produce children. That's how you do it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, drug usage and rehab. Where do you stand on the whole drug war thing?
Well, I'm like I said, marijuana. I think it should be legalized to the extent of alcohol. Um, as far as the harder drugs, well, I think they should remain illegal because I think we've seen the destructive effect of many of these drugs.
Hmm.
That like marijuana and alcohol both have destructive effects, but most of it is determined by yourself because it's you can become alcoholic or you could moderate your drinking. You can become a total stoner and lazy, or you can moderate your marijuana smoking, and you dictate that. I know personally marijuana is not an addictive drug because you can stop it at any
Yeah,
freaking time and
we,
not do
we've
it for
all we've
months.
all been there. Yeah, yeah, we've all been
Yeah,
there. But Yeah,
So
I agree.
but with the harder stuff, they are addictive, and you see people ruin their lives and ruin other people's lives because of that. So for that reason, I don't think they should be legalized. And also for that reason, I think there should be stiff penalties on drug dealers. I think drug addicts should get the treatment, but I think there's only a certain amount of time, like maybe 3 strikes and you're out or something. Something needs to be formulated where, look, if you keep going, if we're trying to rehabilitate you, but you don't want to do that, then you got to go to work camp now, and you're going to have to do some time there. You're not going to have any drugs there, and you're going to get forced not only to get healthy and clean because you're going to be working physical manual labor, but you'll be off the drugs for years as well. So that'll benefit you in the end. But drug dealers, I believe there should be a stiff penalty for them because they are knowingly dealing addiction, death, hardship to their fellow citizen simply for their personal profit. And I think that is the most ugly of reasons to do that. So, and for that reason, I think there should be stiff penalties, much more stiff than they are now, for people that do that. I think we give leeway when we say marijuana or even like people
Psychedelics.
like, I was about to say that ayahuasca.
Yep.
People like to go to that. I think you should actually have centers for that. Maybe not so recreational as far as the
Yeah, I think it
psychedelic.
should be a state monopoly on the production of certain psychedelic chemicals, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe we have tax incentives for, and obviously a sin tax on cannabis consumption, but it should be free and legal. And the thing is, I see so many young men who get a criminal record because they had some marijuana on them, and it's like you're taking someone who is otherwise extremely productive or has the
Mm-hmm.
potential to be, and slapping a criminal record on them, putting them in jail, ruining everything about their lives. I mean, if you get caught, the repercussions can affect you for decades, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just a little bit of cannabis, and there's obviously some medicinal effects for the extraction of THC and CBD, which I don't want to hinder the scientific research for. If there's something there, we need to look into it. Same thing with
Mm-hmm.
psychedelics. I think the state should, in that specific example, I think the state should look into producing those, because they are a little bit more dangerous, especially with people who have known um, psychosis, people with bipolar disorder, or have the potential to do so. It's a little bit of a gray area.
And if you're in a controlled environment, I mean, I think that'd be a lot better for those kind of people too. If they go onto a bad trip or whatever, that you have professionals around you. I know uh, people that I know from like some hippie community that they used to go to, I think, Peru and do a ayahuasca retreat with a shaman. Then they eventually started flying him in to do it at their house and everything like that. And it was very controlled to where everyone was experienced. So if someone did
Yeah.
go into a bad trip, they knew how to deal with it. And that, as opposed to a bunch of teenagers taking a bunch of acid because they want to, oh, get high and freak out, and then bad shit happens. It's like, opposed to that, yeah, if it's regulated and it's I don't want to say sterilized, but sterilized enough to where you have experienced people around you in a controlled environment, it could be very beneficial. Personally, myself, my experiences in psychedelics as I was younger, doing it as a teenager to get high, I had horrible experiences with it. Didn't touch it for maybe 15, 20 years. Then as an adult, matured, much better head on myself, and much better reason for taking them. I had great understanding and of myself and of many things in my life through these experiences, and they were super beneficial to me, and
Right.
like no one ever convinced me that they weren't. And so I've seen the pros and cons of it. I've lived the pros and cons of it. So I see it's very beneficial. I think to every man to dig into their own psyche, if that's what they're looking to try to unpack why they do certain things they do. And I think not only with my anecdotal experience, but with numerous other people I've met too, they've had these moments of clarity and understanding in these realms, let's call them, and of understanding who they are, why they do what they do. So yeah, I think they're very beneficial. But like with anything else, they can be misused, and they can be very detrimental to your health when you misuse them. So especially doing it too much and too often and things like that, it's maybe there should be even a timeline to where like you have a card that's boom, oh, you did it 6 months ago. It's like that's it. You can only do it once
Right.
every year or
I
something.
think for psychedelics, there should also be an age limit, because, as we
Oh
understand
yeah, oh yeah,
psychology now, the brain doesn't fully develop until the age of 25.
yep.
Cannabis and alcohol, I would recommend lowering it to like 18. And of course, culture is going to take a hold of this as well, and make people more responsible. But psychedelics is a whole other thing. Mental psychosis and all of this is possible. raise the age to 25 and then put it in the hands of responsible actors, I think is good. And obviously, rehabilitating those who have been affected by the opioid epidemic and other drugs like that, but severe punishment for those who push it, and also making sure that we can verify that someone is a drug pusher rather than just killing random people because we suspect they're pushing drugs as well. I think that's very important. Now, shifting gears just a little bit, thoughts on the production of pornography, because I have some thoughts about this.
See, this is another one of Pandora's box. Well, first, pornography's been around, probably as long as paper and pen, right?
No,
So,
since the cave days, we've got.
or since I was going to say, yeah, and even in Rome, there was a bunch of pornography on the wall. So, yeah, so it's always going to be there. I think there needs to be a limit. Let's say maybe you can limit how many internet sites put it forward. Maybe you can limit. I don't know. This may be getting too much line crossing, but the genres of porn. I think there needs to be a limit on
you're gonna
you
have
know
a
what I'm saying,
you're
because
gonna have a porn committee,
my
yeah.
goodness, you go down to a porn site and it's like all the different genres. Like holy shit, what is half of this shit? So it's a lot of it. I find very degenerate. Very, I understand the urge of people and why masturbation exists, and I don't think it's necessarily an evil thing. Someone needs to go full non-fap, but I think there's also benefits to that as well. But I also think it's an addictive thing as well, and people are grown up in a porn and internet porn culture, and I think it degrades sex and it degrades relationship with women. I think there's a lot of negative things to it, and I think it even degrades yourself. I know through my own struggles with pornography growing up that I always had a worse impression of myself after I would go through the process
Yep.
and masturbate and do everything. And I'd be like, oh, you fucking animal. Look at you. You're like a monkey. You can't even, you got to do this just to get the stress out of yourself. So,
Yeah.
all these things. So you can tear away at yourself like that too. But at the same time, I don't think it's something you can kill because it's going to be there. If there's some possibility that you can like have a line where like we're making scat porn illegal, we're making gangbangs illegal, we're making anything we say is like cross the lines of just natural sex, that we're going to say this is illegal. I would promote that and try to advance that, try to, you know, make our porn more vanilla, I guess. But
I'd be a little bit more extreme than that, because the way I understand it, biologically speaking, it's one of the most damaging things outside of actual drug addiction. It is one of the most dangerous things that uh, especially men can engage in. It is so psychologically torturing, and it's because you're essentially lying to yourself. You're tricking your brain into a selective mode of thinking, which causes harm to your psychology and to your natural, normal biological function. I think if it were up to me, I would probably crack down on the production of all types of pornography, but in no way, shape, or form would I go after people for looking at it. Absolutely not. You're not going to be able to control people looking at it, but I think there should be heavy regulations on its production and its
mm-hmm.
distribution, because it's so damaging. It's so awful when you really look into this, what it does to people. It's so damaging. It's like the opioid crisis, and people don't think of it like that, but it's a huge deal.
The brain, yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah, yeah.
making us infertile, essentially. And that's one of the worst
Mm-hmm.
crimes against the state, is making people infertile. So as far as I'm
Mm-hmm.
concerned, the production of which should be heavily regulated or outright banned, but I don't want to stop people from looking at it, obviously. And culture, again, is going to take control a lot of this, but it's something we need to think about. Like, hey, maybe, horrible taxes for people who produce this kind of garbage. It's like, all right, you're going to be giving us, 90% of your profits every year if this is what you want to do.
Yep, yep, yep. What about genres? You wouldn't outright ban some genres, or would you just
I'm not in
heavily
favor.
tax?
I wouldn't want a pornography committee that has to sit down and review porn. Like, all right, this week we're looking at bestiality. It's like, all right, Exhibit A. I
Well,
would.
that's illegal now, isn't it?
It's no, it's actually not. In some
Oh, it's
states,
not.
nope.
Oh, wow.
It's.
Okay.
I think it's illegal to produce, but once it's out there, I don't think they can stop it necessarily.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay, I didn't know that. That's crazy. That's
yeah,
crazy.
it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's getting crazy. So one of the things with social policies is the public funding of gender activities, and obviously the Boy Scouts, as it has come out, is completely cucked and is no longer the Boy Scouts. And I loved the Boy Scouts when I was growing up; it was a huge part of my life. I think we should have the Iron Scouts, where
Yeah.
it's a completely even more masculine than the way that the Boy Scouts were essentially. So that's my thoughts. What do you think about publicly funding these gendered activities and having something like the Girl Scouts, where the state has these programs in which girls can engage with other women and have a female role model and things like that?
Oh yeah, all fascists had these essentially Iron Scouts, and for both boys and girls. And yeah, I think they're great. They build community and they build strength and they give knowledge to kids. Yeah, I think this is awesome. And in health, like I always say, like you never saw any fat kids in the Hitler Youth, right? You've never seen that. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, these things are great and positive. And yeah, it's just a sign of the times. The Boy Scouts for a while since they started allowing gay um, what do they call their cub den leaders or something, whatever they call their leaders.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so when they started doing that, I already thought like, well, that's kind of pushing the grounds here. But especially now, it's like I guess it's not surprising the step they took. And it's so, but I haven't paid too much attention to it. So are like the Girl Scouts done now, or is it just one
No,
scout thing?
it's more affirmative action for women. The Girl Scouts can still remain gender segregated all they want to, but now the
Oh
Boy Scouts
wow,
have to
isn't
integrate it.
that
Yeah,
special?
it's fucking stupid. I was a life scout. I made it all the way up. I was one step away from Eagle, and then I got out of it to play
Ah,
sports. So that was a huge part of my life, and one of the most important things I ever did. Even though it was kind of not as masculine as it could have been, but I
right,
learned a lot.
right.
And of course, we're no welfare without work. So if we're talking about welfare reform, if you uh, basically state funded projects. If people need work, we'll put them on infrastructure and the building of utilities and obviously things like that. And if you want to receive a quote unquote welfare check, you have to be working and doing something for the state. All of these type of things. I think we can all kind of agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
But what do we do about the birth control situation? Do you think that it should be regulated by the state? Should we change sexual education? Because it's a big thing with the feminists nowadays is free and open, and our whole identities are sex. Should we have state regulated sexual education? Should we ban birth control? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh wow. Not ban birth control, no. I mean I think this would open up a huge black market for abortion, I think, if you
Right.
banned birth control. And I think this is another Pandora's box thing. It's open now. Maybe in the future, as the culture's there, maybe it gets less and less necessary for birth control. But as of now, like you're saying, it's not like a day one thing you can get rid of. Yeah, you should have a nationalized or yeah, public education on sex. They didn't do a bad job. My daughter is turning 11 soon, and she's just hitting into the stage where she's gonna start going through her
Right.
growing phase. And they just did the sex ed thing for her, and what they did was they sent the video, a link to the video to watch. This is what we're going to show your kids and talk about. If you have a problem with this, sign this paper. They won't be in the class. And I watched it, and I was expecting all kinds of transgender.
Well,
I was
some
expecting.
places have that. Some places do
That's
actually
why I
have
was
that.
expecting it. I was
Yeah.
wondering, like how far is it? Is it and there's a lot of bad shit that goes on at their school. Trust me, but with this at least, it was very good and very educational. And we watched it together, and I learned stuff that I didn't know they go through, and and she learned too. She's like, "Oh my god, that's why this is happening." I was like, "Oh my god, this is." And there's like certain things I didn't know that if she would have came to me, I would have like took her to the hospital. Like, "Oh my god,
Yeah,
something's
yeah,
wrong with
yeah.
her."
Something's falling
So
off. Please help. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So when it's done like that, it's educational. Yeah, it should be. Ideally, you would want both to learn the science behind it at school, and then to have the mother or the father with the boy,
Absolutely.
explain their experience with it and what's it about and everything else. So I think on two fronts that could happen, and like so I had a positive experience through the public education with this specific incident. And there's not many we've had positive experiences with, but this was one of them.
Right. We just need to make sure that it's traditional education, not how it's not the Karma Sutra or whatever Kama Sutra or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
teaching about sexual reassignment surgery or transgender
Oh,
anything like
here's
that.
some condoms as you leave, and yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As much as some people say, "Oh, it's Christian moralizing," it's like, yeah, abstinence is the best thing not to have children. If you
Yeah,
it puts some shame and some morality back into people's thoughts, you won't have to worry about all this.
exactly. We're like there's no shame in this society at all, man. In fact, you're patted on the back for more the degenerate you are. Like, oh my god, he's so brave. Look at this person, and Yeah,
Yeah.
it's we've lost the concept. Except certain things. If you're a racist, you're shamed. If you're a fascist, you're shamed. Like there is, it's kind of flipped
Topsy
around
turvy.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's yeah, it seems a lot for a lot of degenerate behavior. There's no shame for it anymore. Yeah, and I think once we start doing that again and fat shaming and everything else, people will be less wanting to do that, right? They'll get more. We're social creatures. They're going to want to more be a part of the community.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. So I know we already touched on the financial system. Do you have any thoughts about Bitcoin or blockchain financial technology?
No, not I'm so ignorant on that stuff. I couldn't tell you the first thing about it.
Well, I'll give you sort of my initial thoughts. I know quite a bit about it. I haven't done any trading myself because I think it's a scam, essentially. The technology is good, and it has
Mm-hmm.
potential for maybe future financial uses. I think it should be regulated so that it's not so much of a scam in and of itself. But essentially, what's happening now is you have pump and dump. So are you familiar with BitConnect and the scam that was
No,
BitConnect?
no.
So there was this company where you could trade I and in the comments, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but you could trade Bitcoin, which was the most popular form of blockchain currency. You could trade it for BitConnect coin or whatever, and as you invested in BitConnect coin with your bitcoins, you would get a guaranteed return on that investment of 1% a day or something like that. The problem is guaranteed returns on an investment is a scam. Always has, always will be. And they said guarantee returns on all of this. And what happens is they built up the price of this currency to a really high level, and people were making money hand over fist, especially the people that started it. And then you know what they did? They
Hmm.
dumped it and it became worthless. So people lost tens of thousands of dollars.
Hmm.
There's if you go on YouTube and look up BitConnect scam or I lost money because of BitConnect, you have these people who are crying into their cameras saying I lost
Oh,
$30,000, $90,000 on BitConnect, and it's like, well, it's kind of your own fault.
I was
But
about to say that. Part of me is like, yeah, well, fuck you for trying to play the markets, buddy.
that's what you get for speculating. But at the same time,
Exactly.
I get so angry. And it's like, I want to put these people behind bars. These things
Yeah.
need to be regulated, regardless of how you feel about the technology. People are getting screwed. And yeah, it's for a lack of their own education, but that's what the state does. Is it should protect people in these instances. We get a whole bunch of people together who are blockchain experts and say, hey, what can we use this for? How do we prevent people from being screwed? So on and so forth. But yeah, we pretty much already talked about the gold back system and what we think about usury and things like that. Um, Here's an interesting one: private banking or central public banking? Do we seize all of the banks and combine them into one uh, nationalized banking system and disallow private banking of any kind?
Yeah, I'm for that. I'm for centralized national bank, personally. But it's not anything it's not a hill I'm willing to die on, right? Once again, it's not my field of expertise. I think people well versed with the right intentions behind them would figure out what would work best for a country this big and like this, and like I said, with different states and different demographics.
Right. Yeah.
But on the surface value, I'd say, yeah, nationalized bank. But like I said, it's not a hill I'm willing to die on. It's just my initial reaction. It's not. I'm not going to say it's like the right reaction. I'm not sure. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. It's just I think once again, back to simplifying things. I think that simplifies things, and especially if we're creating a society where economics is backed by work, that I think that makes more sense to have a nationalized bank.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
What?
so the main issue is really managing assets because the banking industry is obviously huge. So I think the primary thing, the hill I am willing to die on, is the Federal Reserve and the breakup of fractional reserve banking systems. This fiat currency worthless paper garbage has to be stopped. The Federal Reserve needs to be broken up. We cannot have a private or semi-private company running our monetary supply. If the government can't supply currency, what's the fucking point of having currency in the first place? It's controlled
Right.
by a private interest essentially. So that is something that I'm willing to not agree with other people. And the only people who push that garbage are neoliberals anyway. So, leftists and conservatives and libertarians can all agree that fractional reserve currency banking is a scam and we should just destroy that whole system in and of itself. But I think the final thing that we'll touch on here is firearms because it's a huge deal. I put it in its own category because of the culture of America. What do you think is a sensible take on firearms in America?
Well, like we were speaking about earlier, everyone should go through military training. Children in school should be taught how to shoot a gun, how to load a gun, how to clean a gun, take it apart, clean
How
it,
to respect a
uh,
gun.
how to respect big time, how to respect a gun. So it's yeah, I think everyone should be armed. I mean, you don't I wouldn't say you force everyone to arm themselves, but I think it's a very American thing, right? To have arms. A lot of Europeans don't get it, don't understand it. I always get into Europeans and they're like, "Oh, you guys are so crazy with your guns." It's like, "Well, not really. We had more access to guns 60 years ago and we had none of the crazy shit going on now.
Yeah.
We have less access to guns now, and we got all this wildness going. They want to keep, restricting our access. So it's not that we have access to guns that are causing all of this. It is the culture. It is what's going on. That's at the root of this. So it's yeah, I think everyone should own a gun. I think if you're a man, if you're a woman, if you have a family, if you're single or not, you should have a gun. If you have a house, you should have a gun in that house to protect your house from God knows who. So yeah, I think that is a fundamental part of being American, and I think even though they're getting away with restrictions here, restrictions there, and it's a slow game for them, I gotta believe that's eventually going to be one of the big things that becomes a pushback is as the left or the progressives keep their gun grabbing going up, that more and more Americans will go to more radical political philosophies to fight for their rights to
Yep.
maintain their guns. So yeah, I think it's fundamentally American to own guns. I think everyone should learn how to use guns and have a gun in their house to protect themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fundamental natural right as far as I'm concerned to defend yourself and your property. And it's a practical reality that the state cannot always be there to defend you. And
Mhm.
it's also a strategic thing as well because if your entire populace is armed, yeah, good luck breaking into that country when every single person has a rifle and has, three sons that know how to use them. It's like you have a militia is the key fundamental military I guess force outside of the actual military itself because you're not going to mess with a population where every single person is armed to the teeth. It's just not possible. So I think that's a
Exactly.
fundamental thing. And I would be in favor of changing regulation just a little bit. Obviously, we have some very asinine regulations on suppressors and barrel lengths and certain types of shotguns and certain types of pistols and ammunition and all this ridiculous, artificial barrier nonsense. The thing with automatic weapons is that if you make them legal for possession, you're going to have less of them in the hands of private citizens, I think. And the reason why is because they've been restricted for so long, there's really no market for them. They're so expensive. They're so hard to get in. And if you make them legal, now there's going to be millions of people trying to get them. You're going to raise the price. You're going to price out a lot of people. They're going to be less accessible. And honestly, the statistics are true. Even when they were legal, there was no crime committed with automatic weapons anyway, so it's pointless to ban them. And I mean, honestly, if we're going to put a military grade weapon in every young man's hand, they're going to have to understand the capabilities of such a weapon like automatic firearms. Now, I would agree with some restrictions on weapons of mass destruction, bioweapons, obviously nuclear devices, um, certain types of military grade hardware, like missiles and uh, maybe mortars or something like that. We don't have to get too into the details with this, but explosive devices of some kind up to a certain yield should be restricted. Obviously, we don't want communist revolutionaries gaining access to military surplus and things like that, which shouldn't be a problem in a state, a good state. But yeah, I
Mhm.
think there's sensible regulations to all of this.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Citizens shouldn't be running around with rocket launchers. I don't think that's that controversial.
I, I think
It's
I think it'd be good if the state had a program where you could rent one in a controlled environment. You go
yeah,
down to the local military base, like, hey, you want to shoot a rocket? It's $250, and we'll let you do it. We'll show you how to do it. That'd be great. A
yeah,
great way of
yeah.
bonding between the military and the general population as well. It's like, hey, you want to ride in a tank? Well, you can do it down at the local military base. That'd be a great thing to do.
Hmm.
Kind of like they do in
Hmm.
Las Vegas now, where you can go down to that one relatively famous
Gun
out
store.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah, yeah.
and you can drive a tank or whatever or shoot automatic
Shoot
weapons.
automatic weapons there. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's how it should be. So, any other thoughts on firearm regulations? Any ideas that you have?
No, that's it. Well armed populace, man, is the best way to go. It's gonna stop crime, a lot of crime as well. So Yeah, that's the way to go. It's fundamentally American as well. It's maybe the rest of the world doesn't agree with it or doesn't know what it's about, but that's definitely something that's in our fabric. So yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And final thought, just something kind of goofy to end us off with. If we were to have this new third position government, would you redesign the flag of the United States to something else?
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
This is something people love to do, and
Uh,
I love graphic design too. It's like, what do you do with the flag? Do you keep it the same? I feel that we should
well,
make a new one.
would you here? How about this? Would you run on that? Would you run on creating a new flag and then running from that position?
Hmm, good question. Um, I definitely like some sort of American fascist symbolism. So in Hearts of Iron 4, when you have a fascist American country, it's like the Texas flag, but instead of two red bars, it's the 13 stripes or whatever on the one side. But you have a solid blue left side essentially, and
Hmm.
instead of a Texas star, you have the fasces in white.
Hmm.
And so it has 13 stars underneath it in like a U shape, which is
So
pretty good.
it is pretty good. Now, years ago, a friend and I started our little internet LARPing party called the American Integralist Party. And yeah, of course, like every fascist, like I said, we got to create our own design. So we made the red, white, and blue circle with two lightning bolts to represent the power and one star to represent the unified nation. And so that was kind of our running thing. But I don't think you could run on anything. Like I would wrap myself in the American flag and run with that.
Oh sure,
Maybe, yeah, maybe after power and after it's like, hey, we're kind of a new society now. We're taking a lot from the old, but we're going a lot of new as well. So we're going to reform what our flag is. Maybe then, after you've won power, that is something that could come about. I could see why that should come about because it is a complete different mentality now. So it should be represented in its own symbol, but I think it's too much of a shock and you get too much of the Pavlovian response of anti-American and they hate everything American and they're commies or they're this and that. If you try to make your own symbol and run off of that, I think the leftists always cried that fascism will come with the cross and the flag. I
right.
think they're right. I think they're right. That's how it's going to come. So
Pretty much. The one thing, and I'm glad you touched on it, is that a lot of these third position parties are very hung up on the idea of symbolism and things like that. It's like, no, just use the symbols that are already in place. Use the American flag. I think that if you were going to have some kind of symbolism, use a bald eagle, use the arrows in the olive branch, use the current military, things like that. So you don't scare the living shit out of people who are saying, "Oh my God, the Nazis are back." Essentially, this is
exactly,
just an issue of pragmatism. But yeah, I think
exactly.
it'd be fun to come up with a new flag after the fact. So, and on that note, any type of uniform? Are you looking for like a Silver Legion look with blue corduroy pants?
Gotta have a uniform. You gotta have a uniform. Oh, what kind of fascist doesn't have a uniform? I mean,
Right.
it's yeah, no, eventually, yeah, you would have to. Like I stated before, like eventually I'm gonna like if there's nothing party or no leader ever comes in within the next decade comes around, like I'm gonna start running for local positions. And I was thinking about that. It's like I'll probably always be wearing a black button-up shirt. And it probably won't be so like, oh, I'm a black shirt. It's just I don't know. It's just it feel kind of wrong doing anything else. So I don't know. It's I do think because that kind of invigorates the youth as well. They like the concept
Oh, they
of
love
putting on.
imagery. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I was
So
thinking more like a sort of a semi business casual black suit jacket, black slacks with, nice black dress shirts, but a button down colored shirt with no tie or anything, like kind of an open collar look of a specific
mhm.
color. And then you would have like a pin to represent the party on your label or something like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. It's
the reason I got to talk about this is because this is something that people get fucking hung up on the internet. And it's like, all right, fine, we'll talk about it. It's like, no, we're not wearing the brown shirt, uniforms.
yeah,
No,
yeah. You can't yeah replicate what the Italians, the Germans, or the Mexican Signarxis, the Brazilian Integralist. It's like it has to be something original. I think that's the most important part. I don't like the people that do the brown shirts, the people that do the black shirts. It's like, we got to do something Americana. It has to be Americana. It has to be original. And it's I think that's detrimental. We don't want to seem like we're just piggybacking off of someone else because that looks foreign as well. We got to be American, right?
and that goes back to we're circling back to the start here, which is my intention is to form a whole new political ideology. We're not going to revive the Third Reich. We're not going to revive Mosley's, black shirts. Mussolini is long gone. There's no other parties out there. The Silver Legion barely existed. The American Nazi Party was barely a thing that failed. White nationalism 1.0 essentially failed. We need to forge our own path, and it needs to be intelligent, and it needs to adopt Americana, not just for our own sakes, but for the sake of the people who we're looking to bring
Yeah.
into the fold. So, with
Yeah.
all that being said, I think we've covered just about everything. So, any final thoughts on this?
Prison. We didn't get in prison. I'd
Oh,
say
prison. Yeah, that's
turn
right.
prison into work camps. Too many people sit around idly. And if you put people to work, they'll be physically healthy and they'll get worker ethics. And maybe they'll be less likely to commit crimes because they know they're going to be doing a lot of hard labor while they're in prison.
Right.
So,
And this is like people seem to think that with you have a strong state that it's always punitive justice. It's never rehabilitative justice. It's like, well, work camp is pretty much rehab for a lot of
oh,
people.
yeah.
It's like
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not going to the big problem is like if you're paying people to sit around in jail all the time, you get more punitive justice because people are pissed off that they're sitting around on your tax dollar. Why not
Mhm.
put them to work instead? So I think
Make them contribute. Whether they like it or not, you're contributing to the
yeah,
country.
and
So,
essentially if you break the social contract, which is the law, you have to pay for it, and you're going to work for it. So
yep.
yeah, I agree with that.
Yep. Yeah, that's just one last thing I wanted to throw in. I mean, it's been a great conversation. I think we touched on a lot, I would say.
Yeah, I try to be very thorough. Like I said,
I
preparation.
see.
So
Yeah.
we're not cutting corners here. This is people, seem to beat around the bush a lot of this. Like, no, let's just tackle the issue head on. Because if you really want to do this, if you really care, you're going to do it. You're going to sit down and have these long conversations, and this is going to
Mhm.
spark a lot of discussion that I hope that we can have in the future. Both me, you, everybody who's watching this, maybe even convert some people to show that hey, third position ideology is not what you think it is. So
Mhm.
it's much
Mhm.
more progressive than anything else out there. It's real progress
It really
in
is. Yeah.
society. Yeah. So all right, we're gonna call it there. Thank you everybody for watching. Spread these videos around if you want. Leave me a comment. You can find me on the Discord down in the link, and of course, Culture Thug, your channel will be in the description as well. Go check him out. Watch his videos. They're fantastic. All that being said, thanks for watching. Bye.